Hello and welcome to another Spore creation tips and tricks video. In this video series, I will demonstrate and explain various techniques used in creating or answer questions that you may have. Keep in mind these are all of my own opinion and that Spore is diverse enough that you may come up with your own techniques. If you wish to see the rest of the series, check the playlist in the upper right hand corner or at the end of the video. For today's video, I'm going to demonstrate how you can have smoother transitions in your creatures, whether it be a smoother transition between the spine and the tail, or better musculature, all that kind of stuff. This can be done both via vanilla and via mods. For mods, you only really need the smoother part, although if you will be very creative, you can use other things as well. But for vanilla, we're just going to be abusing limbs in general. Vanilla is, of course, as expected, far more trickier and far more challenging to pull off these techniques, but they do work, and they're quite valid. So for the first demonstration of this video, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate how you can transition the body into things like heads and tails, or necks and tails more like. Since in vanilla the Spore, with the complexity meter and everything, every vertebrae of the spine counts towards the complexity. As you guys can see here, from having a 2 vertebrae spine, we have filled in absolutely 0 of the complexity that is as minimal as you can possibly get in vanilla, and modded in fact. Whereas, if you were to increase the spine to the full potential, to the full size, you've now eaten up 1/3 of your complexity already, and that is a lot to take in, especially for vanilla. While it does indeed have a better physics and better animations, if you're trying to make a complicated creature, it's just too much for the budget. So what a lot of creators such as myself do is instead of having, say the tail made out of spine, what we like to do instead is make the tail out of limbs, which I'll demonstrate to you guys now. Let's just go ahead and make some random little body of a thing. Whatever, we'll just make some random thing here. I'm spending too much time focused on the neck there. And let's go ahead and get the torso filled in. So let's say this is our creature. It's bad, I know, but we'll use it as an example. So here we have a very dodgy, simple little base here. Now, like I just explained, when it comes to using the spine for the tail, as well as it being a massive, it really does choke up your complexity quite a lot, but also it's very, very limited. That is as far out as I can make it. I cannot make the tail any longer. If I wanted to have a very large, say, kind of like a panther tail or like a snow leopard, I just simply can't do it because the game will not let me pull it out any further. So that is another perk to using limb tails, is that it gives you a lot more freedom. So when it comes to limb tails, what I recommend using is either the slack wrist or the brawnysaurus, simply because they have a nice smooth texture. They're not exactly bulging with muscles like the other limbs are. They're very smooth. So what I normally do is try and make the base of the tail about the same size as the tip of the spine, or the body, as you can see here. So you want them to be about the same size, same positioning, all of that. And then, after that, I'll hold Alt on the keyboard to duplicate to the limb, and I'll hold Control, that way I can attach and reattach it onto the limb. What I normally like to do for vanilla is have 3 limbs in total, 4 joints. That way I have a bit of curvature, a bit of length, a little bit of physics, and it just doesn't look quite as awkward. I feel like it's a nice length for it. And then when I'm satisfied with how it looks, what you want to do then, to create the whole transition between the spine and the tail, as you can see here, it's got a very awkward dip there. It is subtle, it's very easy to miss, but it just doesn't look right. It feels a bit ugly, a bit lazy, but there's a very nice and simple way to get rid of it entirely, and that is very simply hold Control, or hold Alt and Control I should say. So hold Alt to duplicate a limb with a foot, and hold Control to snap it to the base of the tail. I recommend this joint here just because it has a lot less influence compared to the other joints, although it doesn't really matter, it's just a preference. And then, when you're happy where your tail is, you're going to go ahead and grab the spine, and you just want to pull it 1 or 2 vertebrae, it depends on your creation, 1 or 2 vertebrae is only enough, into the tail, and that is quite simply it. So now it has a much finer, much smoother transition, no ugly bump, and only at the cost of a minimal amount of complexity. You can, of course, move it around, change the size, change the position, all that, so that you can really get the ideal thing. But it really is that simple. The reason why you have the foot and limb here is simply because it stabilizes the entire tail. It prevents it from moving, so you really can go quite crazy with what you want to do. It does, of course, pop in and out. It's not really the intended purpose here, but it does keep it pretty damn still. Bear in mind that when you remove this all stability part here, if you try to change anything with the spine here, it will cause it to snap out of place. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does, it's a bit of a gamble. But if you ever want to alter the spine in any way, it's really just as simple as doing that. job done. Or if you're really tight on complexity, just put the foot on the end of the tail. It does mean you have to reposition it afterwards, but it's a lot cheaper in complexity and budget. Now that very same technique can also be used for other things such as the neck of the creature. Let's say your creature has a very, very long neck, maybe it's a brachiosaur for example, or any kind of sauropod. And again, you don't really have the budget, the size or whatever to have a very long vertebrae neck, but you can also use limbs and do the exact same technique on the front as well. Again, the animation is not necessarily the best, so if you're worried about animation, it's probably not going to be the best for you, but it does mean you can add a lot more in terms of details later on. This is a technique that I use for both vanilla and modded. Regardless of what I'm doing, it's just really short, quick and easy, and something I very much enjoy. Now while we're on this creation, as you guys can see as well, the shoulders and the hips are looking kind of bulbous. Now there is a way to do all this in vanilla, and again using limbs, but it is very finicky and is not always guaranteed to work. It really does depend. So for the shoulders, there's one technique that we can use, and for the hips, there are two. I'm going to go with the first and probably the hardest one. So this can work on both the shoulders and the hips, or whatever else you want to do it. And I recommend using this limb here just because it has a nice definition. It doesn't matter what limb you use, this one here is just my personal preference. Now what I recommend doing is having the base of the limb being about the same size as whatever you want. Let's say we're trying to get some shoulder mass or like a bit of neck muscles or whatever, that kind of thing going on. You want to have the base of your new limb around there, but you want to have the opposite end as tiny as possible. The midsection doesn't really matter quite as much, it's just this bit that matters here. Now, this, like I said, is not guaranteed to work, it really does depend on your creation. Because this creation here has got a fairly large chest cavity, if I keep on trying to smush it into the body, like just changing angles, just keep on trying again, trial and error, eventually, as you can see here, it will just magically pop inside the mesh. It only really works for creatures with a larger rib cage. Imagine as if it was a barrel, but the walls of the barrel are really thick and there's only like a small little size of storage capacity in the center. That's what you're trying to aim the little ball joint to go into. But the size is big enough, it simply won't fit. Now once we have this, and as you can see I've completely stopped moving entirely, because as soon as I let go and as soon as I move away from that little highlighted joint there, I will not be able to get it again, not without redoing everything. So once you have it there, be careful to have your cursor back over the joint and then increase the size. And with that, you can now have just a little bit of extra musculature. With a lot of trial and error, a lot of nitpicking and, trying here and there, you can try and get, better angles, better directions and such to the muscles. This is of course just a very quick and dirty example, but that's how you can get that. In fact, I'm going to try and do the same thing again by duplicating it, and once again having that as small as I possibly can, and I'm going to see if I can do the same thing on the hips. Now because the spine here is a lot thinner, this will be significantly harder to do. I probably will not be able to get it inside at all, or if I can, it may have to only be in this area over here. Let's try again then. If I can get it in, hopefully fairly quick. I did. Right, that was actually quite quicker than usual. That's, like I said, it's a lot of trial and error, and I've been doing this a lot, so I may make it look easy. Trust me, it really isn't, so don't feel bad if you can't do it. Now, like I said, you can only really do it in the thicker areas. I cannot really bring it any further in here without it popping back out, and because I have since let go, it's going to be really hard for me to try and get the joint again. Oh, I actually managed this time. Okay, that's quite unusual. But what you can do is try to move it around a bit inside, but as you can see, it's very, very delicate and very, very likely to just pop out entirely. But that is in essence how you can add extra musculature definitions to your creations in vanilla. There's one more technique that we can do as well to do the legs, since that there, for this creation it looks a little bit ugly. I personally don't really like it. Maybe if I do that it'll work a little bit better, but it's just one example. What you can also do is have a bit of a combination between that and the whole, smooth tail technique here. So, what I'm going to do then is, if you guys will recall, we had the limb or the vertebrae out by just one for the tail. I'm going to go ahead and bring it back in by 2. That way it's shorter than it ever was before. And quick little note, as you can see there, now that I've just changed that, the musculature here has popped out. So you really, really want to be absolutely sure with your base design before you, try changing it anymore. So these things will pop out repeatedly. I've now moved the vertebrae back in twice. I'm going to go ahead and put the legs here about as far back as I can. Now, the further back that you put them in, the further they're going to go towards the center, and therefore, you know, you're going to have like a really awkwardly tiny pelvis. So what you want to do then is have the base of your hips to be around here, I'd say, whichever feels right for you. As soon as you're happy with the general placement of your hips, go ahead and do the whole thing with stabilizing the tail once again. And now we're going to go ahead and pull the spine back into the tail, about 2 vertebrae now, so it's the same as it was before. The overall result of that is just a slightly nicer transition around the hips. Now they're not quite as big and bulbous, you can really see the difference there between the shoulders and the hips there. It's just, again, very subtle little things, but very low effort once you get a bit of practice and kind of understand it, and it just helps make the creatures feel just a bit more polished. A prime example of what I've just shown you guys there is actually in one of my pony creations, funnily enough. As you can see here, this is made primarily out of limbs entirely. The head's made out of limbs, the legs and the arms as well. But mainly, as I've just demonstrated, the whole thing of merging the spine kind of through the base of the legs. You can see it very clearly here about how the hips here are actually generally quite small. Let's say I also move them, just ever so slightly move them. Say outward siding. Now that is their real position. As you can see, it's kind of unsettling, very, very bulbous and weird. Whereas that is just, again, just a little bit smoother, just the ever so slightest little difference, and it just makes the whole thing just a little bit more petite. If we go back to our demonstration creation here, as you can see again, the hips are quite nice and formed into the spine, but if I move them ever so slightly, they just bulge back out, and again, it just looks very odd by compare. You can see the difference there quite clearly. But otherwise, that's pretty much it in terms of vanilla techniques. Again, they are very hit and miss, they are very trial and error and require a lot of practice. So once again, don't feel bad if you can't get them the first time round. Sometimes it's down to practice, sometimes it's simply down to your creature is not compatible for the technique to work. But the more you practice it, the more you get a hang of how it works and what you can and can't do. So with all the vanilla techniques out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate the smoother next. As the smoother, I'm aware, is a mod that not a lot of people really quite know how to deal with. Now, first of all, the smoother. The way it works is you have this weird little piece here. And that is what it looks like, which to a lot of people may look very strange at first. The intended way for this to be used is to have like any grasper, doesn't matter which, just anything at all. You'll put it on that floating joint there. So okay, now you have these weird floating hands. What's the purpose of them? Well, with these floating hands are now interactable because there are hands there and you can then highlight the joint. You can now control the smoother entirely. So what I'm going to do as a demonstration is I'm going to go ahead and recreate these shoulders, or the neck muscles, whatever they were earlier. Just like the vanilla technique, I want to have the base of this to be about the same size as the parts I'm going to transition it into, in this case the shoulder. So I'll put those about there, and then by grasping the hands, I will then move them pretty much anywhere. Let's say we want some giant shoulder blades. Some nice big, thick shoulder muscles over there. Maybe like that. Maybe make it like a little bit bigger. Maybe I want it to be like a really muscular... Maybe I want it to be like a very highly muscled creature. And then, when I'm happy with it, quite simply, I get rid of the hands, and there you go. I can no longer interact with it, which means I have no risk of moving it at all, unless, of course, I do this. Now, just like all the limb techniques that we've displayed earlier, these are affected by the spine. Sometimes it pops out, sometimes it doesn't. This time it decided not to. But trust me when I say that a lot of these techniques with the limbs or smoothers, whatever, they can just randomly jut out. So these really are for finalising the base of your creature before you add all the details and designs and such. Now the smoother here is really fantastic for a number of things. I primarily use it, just as I've displayed here, for creating just a bit of better muscle definitions, all that kind of stuff. So normally around the shoulders, around the tail, around the hips. Maybe I want like a very subtle little definition around here. That way, you know, the ribs kind of feel like they pop out a little bit more. You can have some pecs as well if you really want to, although it does again require some trial and error. It's very easy to make the pecs look a bit, you know, not pec-like. So all that kind of design there. So as you can see, it's got like a very nice muscle chest. But you can also use it for things like hydra necks. Probably one of my favourite techniques for making a hydra neck is by, if I show you guys here, to get rid of the entire neck down there, move that down, move the leg down there slightly. For those wondering, I put the leg there so that it doesn't move everything behind it. In fact, I'll just demonstrate that quickly while I'm doing it. Let's say I had no stabilizing at all. You'll see all the smoother ones there just kind of move around. Whereas if I have that just slightly in the front there, everything behind it remains perfectly still and stable. So, back to what we're doing. Now we've got rid of the vertebrae neck entirely. Let's say I want a two-headed hydra. Or creature, doesn't even matter what it is. Let's go ahead then and just give it some random necks. Nothing really special, just gonna have like a nice little quick demonstration creature. Like that. Now, as you can see, it's got those really ugly little bulges and creases there. And the general trick with using, you know, the whole smooth limb thing like this, it doesn't really work because it's a split down the middle. It just doesn't really work properly. You can use either technique we showed earlier. You can use the vanilla technique, which involves, let's say we grab this limb here. We'll get rid of all the smoother ones here just for the sake of demonstration. Let us say that we do that, and I can jut it inside, ooh, with a bit of trial and error, there you go. I can do that, it looks a little bit better, not perfect, but a bit better. Or, I can use a smoother, like this. Make that small, so that way we can have better control over everything. Have that about the same size and width as the base of the neck, around here. And then, you know, again, trial and error. All these techniques are a lot of trial and error. And there you go, you can now make the neck just that much smoother. Maybe you want a bit of extra mass around the back of it as well, because after all, these necks would be, you know, require a lot of muscles and such. What you can do then is have a nice big muscly back there, something like that. Whatever you want, it's your creation at the end of the day. You can do it however you wish. But these are just a couple of nice little simple techniques that just really help add a lot more depth and variety to your creations. While all of this is perfectly doable in vanilla, having these smoother parts here does indeed make certain techniques significantly easier and faster. However, it does mean that I cannot be shared on the Sporepedia. So if you want to share your creations online, on the online Sporepedia, then you cannot use the smoother parts at all. Other techniques, of course, can be used, such as flipped over nail downs. This is a personal, or this is a favourite for a lot of people. You can also use Dark Injection's textureless parts as well, for like the really fine little pieces here and there. All of these work. Just for this video, I'm demonstrating the limb variants. So everyone, I hope that was helpful. Hope you learned a couple of things. As always, if you want to know any more techniques, any more ideas, or how I do things, please do let me know. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.